without further ado, let's find out what does happen if rents go too high and price people out of their ability to afford to live in our rentals. Let's find out how to avoid the number one worst thing that's horrible for any of us in this room and horrible for any of us in our units. It's not something that we experience often, but stuff happens. And if it does, there are resources out there that can help us create a win-win situation for everyone. And for that reason, I'm so excited to introduce you to Evan from Jesse Tree. Welcome to AVID Investors, Evan. Thank you so much for taking your time to hear and to share.
Thanks so much for having me. Hi, everybody. My name is Evan Stewart. Make sure I'm in the right spot, just so everybody can see. My name is Evan Stewart. I'm the executive director at Jesse Tree. Jesse Tree is an eviction and homelessness prevention agency. So simply put, our mission is to help keep renters housed and prevent them from entering into homelessness. And I've been with Jesse Tree for over 6 years. So previously, I worked as the program director, so I was in charge of scaling up our programs and services, designed some pretty unique programs throughout the years that we still have. I'm happy to share those services with you. And I know, Stacy, you sent me a list of questions. We talked for about an hour on the phone. It was a really great conversation. So I'm going to do my best to make a mental note and try to answer those questions throughout the presentation. And I'm pretty easygoing. So, I mean, if you have questions throughout the presentation, feel free just raise your hand or just shout out your question. But with that, I'll get started. And just quick overview. So I'm just going to talk a little bit about our mission and organizational overview, the type of clients that we serve. So maybe renters that you have, and maybe you've actually accessed some of our services before. I'm not sure if you've had. And just really what we're trying to do, what we're trying to solve, and really our programs. And as landlords, things that you could know. So if you do have a tenant who does fall behind on rent, hopefully you'll know exactly what to do, or at least point them in the right direction of where to go. So, I don't know how long you guys have all lived here, but Jesse Tree's been in the Treasure Valley since 1999. So we've been a vital resource for a long time. And honestly, we were a pretty small nonprofit for a long time. I started in 2020. There were 5 of us at Jesse Tree. So it was me, our former executive director, Ali Robbie, and a couple case managers. And COVID is really what happened to allow Jesse Tree to grow, to try to meet the demand that we are seeing across the Treasure Valley. Our volume from 2019 to 2020 went up 200%, obviously because of the pandemic and people losing their jobs. And people kind of saw Jesse Tree as that vital resource that people really needed to access, since housing became much less affordable. And we were just seeing a lot of people starting to go through eviction court, and we're seeing homelessness increase as well. But our founder started in 1999. So it was originally from a church, a Catholic church here locally. It was a priest and his congregation who went around, noticed that people were experiencing homelessness. So they really were just having those conversations with those people, just say like, hey, what happened to you? Why are you homeless? And it was pretty much the same story across the board, that people were doing fine. They had a rental, they had a job, and then just something happened that caused them to fall behind on rent. Either maybe they lost their job, or something happened to really cause them to fall behind. And as a result, they were evicted. And we know the story. Sometimes people just kind of fall into chronic homelessness, and it's really hard to pull yourself out of that. And that's really what we're trying to prevent from happening. And you're probably all pretty familiar with some of these trends and statistics, since you guys are in property management, real estate, and I actually learned quite a bit from your presentations earlier too. So thank you for that. But like you were talking about too, we have seen a lot of people move to Idaho in such a short amount of time. So we've seen Idaho for once finally surpass about 2 million people living in the state, which is pretty incredible. And I'm sure we we all love a booming economy, and Boise is a great place. The Treasure Valley is awesome. Idaho's doing very well economically. And, when those forces happen, sometimes there's just unintended consequences that happen to people, who are really doing the best they can. And, unfortunately, we do see people get priced out of the market. And that's something that we at Jesse Tree see every day. People, families who are just struggling to, pay their rent, pay their bills. So we're seeing a lot of that happening. And, in such a short amount of time, we saw rent increase by over 40% in just a short amount of time. And at the same time, the cost of basic needs increasing, like insurance, car payments, groceries, fuel, which is what we're seeing, right now. So all of this was just kind of like a tsunami that really impacted a lot of people who are doing the best they can to stay housed. They were doing fine, and then rent shot up, affordability became much harder for people. And that's really the story of many of the clients that we serve at Jesse Tree. And just some other stats that, again, I'm sure you're very familiar with. Idaho ranks 45th in the nation in average wage compared to cost of living. We have seen wages increase between 12 and 30% over the last few years. Unfortunately, most of the people that we serve are more on that lower end of the wage increase spectrum. 50% of Idaho renters are considered cost burden, which means that nearly half of their income goes just to rent. And, usually you kind of like 30% kind of that safe margin for people putting, towards their home. Unfortunately, we see people who put a lot more than 30% towards just their rent.
Cost burden, can you say the definition of that again, please, Evan?
Cost burden. So that means how much income goes towards the rent.
And were you saying 50%?
50% of Idaho renters are considered cost burden.
And that proportion means they're paying more than what percent of their income?
It's so more than 30%.
More than 30.
So at Jesse Tree, though, we're seeing people paying closer to half their income just towards rent. And just across the state, we do have an affordable housing shortage. Idaho is just one of two states that does not invest into their housing trust fund, which is basically a revolving door of funds to help build and incentivize for more affordable units. So, and I do talk to legislators, and I know people, at the Capitol, and they're really trying to focus more on things that have to do with affordable housing. I think it's going to take time. I know the city of Boise is doing the best they can, but it's very difficult to incentivize developers to bring in more affordable housing when there's not really much out there to incentivize the developers other than maybe trade-offs with zoning and things like that. So I think that's a big struggle that many cities in the Treasure Valley have is really trying to incentivize those developers coming in to do the more affordable housing. And I think somebody mentioned earlier about, I think it was you, sir, about seeing just more luxury-based apartments coming in, and that's definitely true, and that's something that we see happening very often in the city. And I have a friend who's a zoning commissioner, and he says the same thing. It's usually the projects that are being pitched are the ones where the rents are going to be very high, but it's still good to bring in housing for people as well. So again, this is kind of the story of what we see at Jesse Tree. So we see people who, again, are doing the best they can. And can you guys see, or should I stand out a little bit so you can see the screen? Okay. So what we see, we're typically working with working families. So pretty much everybody that Jesse Tree works with are employed. And I think a myth that people maybe think about, just assuming that maybe organizations like Jesse Tree, other nonprofits, are only just helping people who are maybe just on like food stamps or maybe like SSI, things like that. But that's actually really a small percentage of the people that we serve. So we're serving people that there's actually a name for it. It's called Alice. Have you guys heard of this before? So it's a group, a population that would be considered asset limited, income constrained, and employed. So that's really the type of people that we're working with. So they're people that make too much to get put on, federal benefits, but they don't make enough to cover the rent, the child care, the bills, all the different things that people have to face and try to afford. But for us this is just an example of an average monthly wage of $3,400, where $2,000 goes towards the rent, 800 goes to childcare, 600 goes to those other really important necessities that we all need. And again, this is really what we see is people are doing, the best they can. They're doing okay until they're not. And usually it's just one unexpected expense shortfall that can easily lead a family into eviction. We're seeing more people become homeless for the first time than ever before across the Treasure Valley. Right now, there's 10,000 people in Idaho who would be considered homeless. Many of those are children as well. There's an estimate about 5,000 children across the state of Idaho are homeless. Some of those are with parents, but unfortunately, some of those are unaccompanied youth as well. And the big ones,
5,000, did you just say?
5,000, yeah, children. So some of those have
In Treasure
parents.
Valley?
Yes. Oh, no, in Idaho.
In Idaho.
Yeah, in Idaho. The big ones that we see are death in the family. That's a big one that we see. We see a vehicle repair. So somebody's vehicle breaks down. That's a competing priority. We also see probably the biggest one has to do with a medical or a life-changing event that has to do with health. So a lot of our clients have some sort of health issue. Maybe they recently went through hospitalization and they had to cut back on hours. And that's definitely a big one that we see as well. And unfortunately, we do see people who were victims of a domestic violent crime as well. That's actually one of the highest leading causes of homelessness in Idaho is people fleeing from a domestic violence situation, unfortunately. And again, the reality, about 40% of Idaho renters can't cover an unexpected $400 expense. The average unexpected expense is $1,000. And, everybody that we serve at Jesse Tree are living paycheck to paycheck. And everybody that we serve would be considered under the 80% area median income. 75% of our clients that we serve are closer to that 50% area median income. And just our program. So we really have three main programs.
Sorry, I'm so sorry.
Oh, yeah.
Did you say 60, what was that, 60%
Oh, yeah.
stat of,
Living paycheck to paycheck.
and that's 60% of your clients?
Idaho renters.
Oh, 60%
Yeah.
of Idaho
Mhm.
renters.
Yeah.
Thanks.
All of
This
our-
client really.
All of our
statistic.
clients are definitely living paycheck to paycheck.
So 60% of the people in the room that we're renting to
There's-
are paycheck to paycheck.
I think there's a good chance. Yeah.
And so 4 out of 10 of them could topple over $400.
Okay. Yeah.
Okay.
That's what we see all the time. So just our program. So we have three main programs. So I kind of want to start with our tenant resource center just to give you guys some information as property owners and landlords. So the tenant resource center is really open to anybody who's a renter. So last year we received about 20,000 calls across the Treasure Valley. And our tenant resource center is staffed by 30 different volunteers. So some of the volunteers have been at Jesse Tree even longer than I have. So some are, retired, nurses, social workers. We actually have a retired admiral who's been a volunteer at Jesse Tree for over 6 years before I even started. But really it's kind of like the one-stop problem solving phone line. So really it's a phone line. People can call in. They can also come to Jesse Tree if they have problems. But really what we try to do in our tenant resource center is to educate tenants on landlord-tenant rights and responsibilities, best practices. So if people are afraid that they're going to fall behind on rent, number one thing we always communicate is talk to your landlord. That's the most important thing a tenant should do. is be honest and transparent with their landlord. Don't try to hide these things from, the person who's collecting rent. We talk about payment plans. We talk about reaching out to families, friends. Often we hear people are very embarrassed and ashamed to even ask for help. I mean, I think that's definitely a cultural thing, and it's very common. I think that we see just even in Idaho or just as Americans, we don't want to ask for help, but it's something that, people should feel more comfortable doing. But we're fielding about 2,000 calls a month. If somebody does have is going through the eviction, that's when Jesse Tree is a vital resource for those tenants. So if somebody has received either an eviction pay or vacate notice or even an eviction court summons, we can get involved and try to help. We do that by offering case management, supportive services, and emergency rental assistance. Our supportive services involve budgeting, financial literacy. So we try to help create a budget and tailor it specifically to the household that we're working with. We try to provide ideas to help build and increase income. We have different partnerships to refer for job employment, things like that, if somebody happened to fall behind and lose their job. We do an action plan. We do lots of different resource mapping, different direct referrals. So the supportive services to us is a very important piece of what we're trying to do. We're trying to empower people to take responsibility, to be able to sustain their rent moving forward, but they just need a little help. And we offer a one-time emergency rental assistance. Most of the people, oh yes.
Okay.
Hmm?
That's 100 people a day.
100 people a day.
You said 2,001?
Yeah, when they call our tenant resource center. But in terms of applications, we can only take applications for people going through the actual eviction process, which isn't 100 people a month. Or sorry, you said 100 people a day?
Well, you said 2,000, I put 20.
Oh, yeah, yeah. But at any given time, we have a wait list of about 100 households. So we're typically working with 100 households while another 100 are waiting to work with us. Because we see a lot of people going through the eviction process, more so than ever before. But we do have a really unique program. So if you ever do find yourself in Ada County Eviction Court, you'll see Jesse Tree there. So every Tuesday, Thursday, there's eviction court here in Ada County. We have a direct partnership with the county court system. They do offer mediation, and we do work within the mediation space. So we can be involved in a case if even if you don't reach out to us, we'll be there.
Well, how long does it take to get from the wait list into the activity?
Well, it can take we tell people it could be about 2 weeks. On average, we're working with the household for about 2 weeks. We do have quite a bit of staff, so we have people being assigned to case managers daily.
You find it in that gap, there is already an eviction occurred because of that gap.
Not really, because we do have a team that goes to eviction court. So our wait list is really the people who've received those pay or vacate notices. So if too much time has gone by, which we do try to stay in touch with people if we can't assist in a timely manner, but we do kind of have our backup squad, and they go to eviction court. They're there every Tuesday, Thursday, and we have a pretty high success rate, which I'll give you some numbers on that here in a little bit. But most of the clients we work with, we call them clients, you guys call them tenants, have just received that pay or vacate notice. And usually the landlord is kind of giving them a little bit of time to try to, settle up and try to get the rent paid, and they might just need a little bit of help. We also offer a couple other additional programs. So again, like I mentioned, a lot of our clients have issues with their health. They maybe need to be connected to some healthcare resources. We have a community health worker on staff who can work with our clients maybe 2-3 months even after we help get them caught up on rent, just to try to help them navigate some of these medical or healthcare issues, and trying to get them connected to some concrete goods. And we also have a housing navigation team too. So I'll explain a little bit when I get to some of the eviction court numbers. But, you know, if there has to be a move out, so maybe an eviction court, the settlement is, hey, these people actually have to move out. We'll try to buy them some time and then assign them to our housing navigators to see if we can locate something more affordable for them, which it is actually quite hard to find something more affordable. But we do have some really good partnerships with some of the more, you know, low income housing. It's usually the people who would definitely be more lower income who would qualify for those.
And Evan, so full disclosure, guys, I've never even been to eviction court.
Oh,
I
really?
have
Okay.
some rental units.
Has anyone? Yeah, it's not fun. Yeah.
I have a property manager who has,
Mhm.
and Jesse Tree was involved. And I think it's my understanding when you say buy some time, I think you mean that kind of literally. I think you literally paid some rent
Oh, yeah.
to
yeah.
literally buy the tenant time. And so I think what happened was what would have been just a vacancy and a tenant needed to move out and there was this backlog of expenses. I believe Jesse Tree kind of came in and helped fill that gap enough that it was reasonable for the tenant to stay longer and have that second chance to get on their feet.
Yeah, and that's really our goal is to, I mean, we offer quite a bit of financial assistance. I mean, last year we were able to offer about $1.8 million in emergency rental assistance to about 1,200 different households across the Treasure Valley. In some cases, if there is a move out, we can offer some payment for that, maybe to give somebody at least 30 days. It just depends on what's really negotiated during eviction court. But again, the vast majority of the people that we're serving don't end up in eviction court. They just have received that pay or vacate notice. And out of the generosity of the landlords, they didn't initiate the eviction, the actual eviction process after the 3 days. They gave those tenants a little bit more time to try to find a solution. And to be honest, our most valuable partners at Jesse Tree is the landlord community. They're the ones who refer the majority of people to Jesse Tree to try to get some type of service. And, you know, just because of how great the need is in the community, like I said, our volume went up about 200% since 2020, and it's steadily been about that. So it hasn't really decreased since COVID happened, unfortunately. It can take a while to get assigned, so we can't help everybody, unfortunately, because there's just so many people trying to access our resource right now. And this is just an example of that from, you know, our impact in 2025. We received 3,794 applications. So those are people who were formally in the eviction process. So either they received that pay or vacate notice, or they had an actual eviction court summons. We were able to serve 1,229 of those almost 3,800 people who applied, which means that we just couldn't get to everybody in a timely manner because eviction is tricky. It's evicting. The eviction process is actually the fastest in Idaho than any other state. You know, when it comes to non-payment of rent, that's an expedited case. So those can move very quickly, and it just depends on who the landlord is. We're typically working with the big, I'd say like corporate property management companies who have their own policies. So sometimes things move a lot quicker than maybe a private owner, a private landlord who's trying to give their tenant a little bit more time. But 32%, that's how many people we were able to serve last year out of the total number of applications we received. And that's including Nampa, Caldwell, Meridian, and Boise.
You refer to families. I don't rent to families that might not all have to be single individuals.
Mhm.
What's the percentage of families that apply versus individuals?
Yeah. I believe our data shows about 60% of the households that apply to Jesse Tree have children in the home. So I would, I guess, classify that as the families that we serve. So we do serve individuals, and I would say we actually see most of the individuals we serve in eviction court because, you know, a single income, it's got to be a little bit harder than a family. But the way we assign cases too is we try to triage based off of a vulnerability factor that's highly associated with people that actually do enter into the shelter system and enter into homelessness. So a lot of single parents, so honestly, a lot of single mothers with children we serve, people on fixed income. So we do try to prioritize those folks. Domestic violence survivors, we do prioritize them. But again, the one that I think is the highest is those who have some type of medical condition or have undergone a more like life-changing event due to their health. And this is just some data in terms of eviction filings in 2025. So there, between Ada and Canyon County, there's almost 2,000 eviction cases filed, a slight decrease from 2024. And I think, you know, what we hear is that a big reason for this is actually because of Jesse Tree as being a resource. And just some statistics for you. So Ada County is the only county that does offer a mediation service in eviction court. And out of all the cases that did go to mediation, which is pretty much, I think, 75% of the evictions that were filed in Ada County, the ones that Jesse Tree were involved in, 80% success rate, meaning that there was a mutually beneficial agreement between the landlord and the tenants, and that settlement was fulfilled, which means that the tenants didn't have to have an eviction on the record, and hopefully the landlords were made, you know, whole or partially whole, and didn't have to actually evict the people formally. In Idaho, eviction is permanent. That follows a household, an individual, a family with them their entire lives, and that makes it a little bit harder to find stable and safe housing, especially nowadays where the majority of the landlords that you see are more of those corporate, you know, big property management companies that have pretty rigid policies. This is just an example. So, you know, I've seen every scenario at Jesse Tree in terms of the clients that we serve. You know, this is just an example of a household that we served. Renee, so a single mother. We work with a lot of single mothers, and the data through eviction court actually shows that single moms and people with disabling conditions are at much higher risk of being evicted and falling into homelessness, especially those if they were affected through domestic violence as well. But this is just an everyday scenario we see at Jesse Tree. And, you know, Renee, a mother of two, and all it took was one of her kids to get sick, had to stay home from school, had the bad case of the flu. Unfortunately, Renee, at her job where she works 40 hours a week, doesn't get paid time off. So just had to take a week off, lost that week's worth of earned wages. And next thing you know, she falls behind on her bills, falls behind on her rent. A lot of the clients that we serve, it's a competing priority. Do you pay your rent first, or do you pay your car payment? Do you pay for groceries to get, you know, food on the table for your kids? This is just really the reality of a lot of the people that we see who need Jesse Tree as a resource. What Jesse Tree does, we try to come in. We're really an intervention agency. We're a resource. We're not the solution to housing or the affordability crisis that families face or individuals. So we're able to step in, help with budgeting. What we really try to do is help somebody plan and build an emergency fund so that when these things happen, they might have something that they can contribute so that they can also pay their rent and keep a roof over their head. You know, one that just happened recently, hopefully I'm okay on time, Stacy. A new client that I just found out about yesterday. So there was a popular restaurant here in town that closed down recently. I think it closed down last year, which I was super bummed about. And I'm sure if I told you what that restaurant was, you'd be like, oh yeah, that's a great place. But we found out that the owner suffered from a heart attack, and unfortunately they had to close down their business. And they had to get put on a disability and get on SSDI and drain their savings to try to, you know, pay rent, pay their bills. And that's who our client is right now. So this person was doing just fine, owned a business, pretty great restaurant. Had a heart attack and it just changed his life. Now he's struggling. Now he's behind $9,000 in rent. And we got to figure out how to help him. And luckily his landlord is very friendly and wants to find a way to kind of work this out. But again, it just really happens to anybody. It's not just the people that we associate, chronic homelessness with, things that, we see. It's happening more than ever before. And, prevention is, it's really a great strategy. So it's compassionate and it's very cost effective for the community. There's been studies done by the Idaho Policy Institute where it costs about $58,000 per individual experiencing homelessness. That's taxpayer dollars that go to funding the emergency response system, when people get hospitalized, food, shelter, all these different things, often is at the expense of the taxpayer. So about $58,000 of taxpayer dollars per individual experiencing homelessness in our community. We have partners that work with people who are experiencing homelessness and are trying to rehouse those people back into housing. That costs about $20,000 to rehouse a family. And that's the security deposit. That's probably paying back rent that was owed, paying to get their utility, turned on because they owe money on that. Some of the stabilizing services, things like that. But for Jesse Tree, it's $2,000 on average to keep a family housed. We have a 95% success rate. And I know that because our data is connected across the state to the shelter data. So people who enter shelter, if they had access Jesse Tree as a resource, the shelter will know and they collect that data and they disseminate that. But 95% of the people that we've served don't end up homeless 5 years later. And so that data comes out every year to see who we helped the previous year. And it's always hovering about 95%, which is quite amazing.
Most of homelessness issues are involved in employment. So you house someone, but what do you do about the employment situation that caused the homelessness in the first place?
Yeah. So, pretty much everybody we work with does have a job, but there are many people who've lost their job, but they're starting a new job, but it's just going to take time for them to get paid to be able to pay their rent. So what we see is that because evictions are so fast in Idaho, that if time isn't given, so if somebody is starting a new job, but their landlord's not willing to wait, we see those people lose their housing faster than many other people. So if they're waiting to get paid, but the landlord's not willing to give them time, we see that happen quite often. But in terms of employment, most of the people we serve do have jobs, but they just can't, afford the rent and afford other bills as well simultaneously.
But is not employed?
Yeah, we'll try to connect them to employment. So we actually have quite a bit of partnerships with the Department of Labor through some of their different contacts that can offer employment. Idaho Youth Ranch is a big one. So they actually employ quite a bit of people from Jesse Tree if they don't have a job at the moment. But for us, we also want to see that they're going to be sustainable moving forward. So that's why we might have to work with them longer to help them get employment, because if employment, if they're not going to get employed or the landlord's not going to be willing to wait, it's going to be much harder for us to be as effective. So those cases can take longer if they're searching for work. But most of the clients we serve do have jobs. They just have more of one of those unexpected emergencies that just kind of put them behind on rent. And just to reiterate, cutting a check to a landlord is super easy. We do it all the time, but that's not really, our main focus. Our main focus is to provide real stabilizing services. We want to empower people to be responsible tenants, to be able to pay their rent moving forward, to be sustainable. That's why we really try to connect them to different resources in the community, employment, if that's something that they need, we definitely want to try to do that. financial literacy, where really we're trying to cut back on expenses, create a budget with them, and develop a plan to help them build an emergency fund so that this doesn't happen again. That's really what our team really tries to focus on. And, these are just some areas that you could help. I mean, Jesse Tree is a nonprofit, so we have a very diversified funding stream. So we only exist really because of the generosity of the community. We receive lots of private donations. That's what allowed us to have $1.8 million last year to spend on rent for people who are falling behind and help keep landlords whole. We also work with foundations, things like that. We do receive some government funding from the cities as well. We have 30 different volunteers. So if you're ever interested in volunteering, there's always an ability to do that. And just be educated on what different resources are in the community to help direct your tenants towards. Jesse Tree is really that end of the line stop. You really want to try to have your tenants figure it out either through their friends or their family, or if they're members of a church, or give them time to, catch up. Either, again, maybe they're starting a new job late and it's going to be a couple weeks before they get paid. So just giving them a little bit of time. We do a landlord focus group every year, and landlords say it costs about $7,000 to evict a household. That's keeping your unit vacant. That's having to pay your attorney. That's unpaid rent. So just giving a little bit of time, I think, will be the best strategy for you as landlords. And just other things, if you're worried about affordability or worried about your kids' future, if they're able to, be able to afford this area, talk to your city council members, your legislators. If you feel like there needs to be more housing that's affordable, only people who can do it are the legislators. So, don't be afraid to talk to them. I've talked to them many times. They're all really nice people. It's just a lot to manage in Idaho. And yeah, that's really about it. We talk to our clients after we help them, we have them fill out a survey. We ask what home means to them, and they pretty much all say home is everything. I think we can all agree on that. And yeah, so thank you guys so much for having me, and really appreciate it.
I want to say thanks for being here and sharing all that
Yeah.
stuff. I think there's if this is something you're comfortable speaking about, but I think there's a perception that homelessness equals drugs.
Mhm.
Is that something that you can speak on? Is that fine on your population? Is that,
Yeah. We don't really work directly with people experiencing homelessness, but we definitely see that. I would say those that probably are chronically homeless, I think there's some of that to it. I think there's probably disease, there's maybe substance use that was abused in the past. I think those are real things that do cause homelessness. But unfortunately, we also see other people who were, maybe not associated with being, a drug user, and it's more of an affordability issue. I think when people enter homelessness for the first time, it's definitely more of an affordability issue. I think over time, if somebody is homeless for a long time, it's a very unsafe place to be, living on the streets. And I think you might see some of that happening more and more. But I do definitely think that that's a part of the story of people experiencing homelessness. But I think there's many different aspects to it as well. But yeah, I think I think there's some truth to that for sure. I mean, I think there's data to back that, but I also think the majority of people experiencing homelessness is because of rent not being affordable. There's actually a study done. I'm just trying to remember who did it. But they looked at a place in West Virginia, and it was, I think, per capita had the highest like mental health illness. I think there was also some drug usage, but they found that a lot of people, really nobody was homeless there because they had a housing stock that was affordable. So I think part of the story is when people do become homeless, like you see in California, where it's very hard to afford rent over there. I think that's the big part of the story is that when housing becomes less affordable, you're gonna see more people become homeless. And I think there's definitely probably a subset of that population that, may unfortunately be affiliated with drugs as well.
Do you guys have any stipulations for the length that you would go to help someone? Because from experience, I had a tenant that was chronically weak forever. You guys helped for a few months
Mhm.
and then he went to evictions and we had to move out, go through evictions, all of that
Yeah,
shortly after, and he admitted to abusing the system.
yeah. We do our best to try to, we've learned many lessons over the years. The big one is, because we have a team that goes to eviction court. And we also have a team that's trying to help prevent people from going to eviction court. So, a big thing that we're trying to do is to ensure that those tenants are going to be sustainable moving forward. So where we try to do a lot of the budgeting and, try to provide the advice, the right advice. And, working with people is difficult. I'm sure as a property manager, you just never know what you're gonna get. Unfortunately, I'm sure some people do abuse that system. We really try to do a one-time assistance, within 12 months. We really don't want to keep serving the same people over and over again. And luckily, the data shows that 80% of the people we've served in the last 6 years are kind of a one and done, like their first time. We never see them ever apply again in the future, which is great. But yeah, I mean, we can kind of be flexible with how much we can pay, but we're also not trying to enable people. That's really not our goal. And unfortunately, I'm sure that does happen. We can only work with the information we get from tenants. We do collect their income and we do a budget. We do go over expenses and things like that. And we do create an action plan. And then, once we kind of set those people free, you hope that they kind of follow through with that. Yeah. Mhm.
Yeah, 6 or 8 years ago, I had, maybe before you were here.
Yeah.
I had a guy kind of like Ben Yells and, he was assisted at the eviction court by Jesse Tree person. And Jesse Tree did an excellent job of everything he did.
Oh, thank you.
I have the highest regard and thanks for being here.
Yeah, thank you. Appreciate it. Yeah. Yeah. We really do the best we can. I mean, the team that I work with, they really care. Again, there's a lot out of our control. But the best case scenarios are when, you have a tenant who's really, they really feel the gravity of the situation. And they're doing the best they can. They're reaching out for help. They're communicating with their landlord. That's when you see like a real recipe of success, especially in mediation, because you have a mediator, you've got the landlord, the tenant, usually you have the landlord's attorney, you have a Jesse Tree rep, and that's when you see like a really good recipe for success. If it's somebody who doesn't want to work and they try to access Jesse Tree as a resource, we're probably not the right resource for them, because we really don't want to just write a check and then see them in eviction court the next month. And that's kind of what I meant when we have a team. It's really demoralizing if you help somebody and then a month later our other team's like, well, what happened? Because this guy didn't have a job or something, like we're really trying to avoid that.
Us property managers too, when you have someone like that, it kind of just, it feels sad because it feels like those funds could go to somebody else.
Yeah, and we're not really that pushy. We can't really provide a service if the landlord isn't going to be okay with accepting that service and accepting the rent check from us. So if a tenant's ever involved with like damaging a property or like drug use, criminal activity on the property, like we won't ever get involved in those cases. It's we're only involved in non-payment of rent situations. And as landlords, if you have a good tenant and you like them and they're doing the best they can, but they fell on hard times, then that's a good referral to Jesse Tree. Sometimes there's personal issues. you know, you don't always have to like your tenant doesn't always have to like your landlord. But if it's really just about the money, then like that's when Jesse Tree is a really good resource. But if it's damage, things like that, we're never gonna get involved in those cases. Yeah. All right, well, thank you guys. Yeah.
Thank you.
Yeah.
You guys, those were some really great questions, and I really appreciate also the stories that you shared about your personal experiences with Jesse Tree. Thank you for sharing. I really appreciate that. Stop that, stop that, and stop. Thank you. Okay. All right.
Oh.
Sorry, I'm not good at technology. Avid investors, Evan Stewart from Jesse Tree, thank you so much for being here. And I don't know how much more I could have gleaned from this presentation. That was tons of data and tons of facts. And the bottom line is it's a really feel-good organization because Evan is a part of community assistance that is good for the tenants, that's good for the community, and that's also good for the landlords, where we all get to be on the same team. It's not about enabling. Evictions cost, I guess, an average of $7,000. And Jesse Tree is helping fill that hole in a way that prevents homelessness and also prevents a little old landlord from having to hit a $7,000 expense that we're not wanting either. And so there's a good thing all around. So what started as apparently a Catholic priest observation became quickly an organization preventing homelessness, which is a growing problem in Idaho. Now that we've reached over 2 million people in little old Idaho, Jesse Tree's volume, it's no surprise, doubled 200% during the COVID pandemic. And renters are their clients, but you as landlords are the people who are referring the clients to Jesse Tree. So they can work together to provide resources and to empower renters, teaching them budgeting, teaching them how to ask for help, letting them know, no, don't hide this from your landlord. Let's work together. And that's what would happen in eviction court, working together in mediation. And at the end of the day, 95% of the people who Jesse Tree helps don't find themselves homeless, despite walking into Jesse Tree's office or phone with an eviction notice. They're helping a class of folks called ALICE. I learned that ALICE is asset limited, income constrained, and employed people. And it sounds like they're one catastrophe away from topping, whether it be a medical event, a vehicular incident, or domestic victimization. And it was really sad for me to hear that there's 5,000 children in Idaho who currently are homeless. And Treasure Valley is seeing more people becoming homeless for the first time in this state where we're 45th in the nation of wages compared to the cost of living. And so what we can do is say thank you to Jesse Tree, welcome them here, call them if we have a tenant, not someone who's gonna fail, but someone we think is just in that category of people who had a bad day, and nobody wants evictions. None of us do. So that's what I took out of this long recap. Big thanks.
Yeah.
Jesse Tree.
Thank you so much.